My name is Tori Myers, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. But that Tuesday morning in October changed everything I believed about family, trust, and the son I'd raised for 42 years. When my son, Paul, walked into my kitchen with tears streaming down his face, telling me his father, Richard, my husband, had died of a stroke at Mercy General Hospital, my world shattered. The coffee mug slipped from my hands, shattering on the tile floor, a sound that would haunt me for months. But just 2 hours later, as I sat numbly planning a funeral, my phone rang. It was Wells Fargo. "Mrs. Myers, we're calling about unusual activity on your joint account. Your husband just withdrew $800,000 in person at our downtown branch." My blood turned to ice. How could a dead man empty our life savings? When I demanded to see the security footage, nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The man in the surgical mask and baseball cap had Paul's distinctive limp from his college football injury. Before I share what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me tell you how I discovered my son's unthinkable betrayal. That morning started like any other. Richard had left early for his weekly golf game, or so I thought. I was making my second cup of coffee when I heard Paul's car pull into the driveway. Unusual for a Tuesday at 7 a.m. When he walked through my kitchen door, his face was pale, eyes red-rimmed. He hadn't shaved, and his usually pressed shirt was wrinkled. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "Mom, you need to sit down." My heart started racing. Mothers know when something's terribly wrong. "What is it, Paul? Is it the kids? Is Jennifer okay?" He shook his head, pulling out the chair across from me. His hands were trembling as he reached for mine. "It's Dad." "Mom, I'm so sorry. Dad didn't make it. The doctor said the stroke was massive." The words didn't make sense. "What stroke? Your father's playing golf." "No, Mom. The country club called me when Dad didn't show up. They found him in the parking lot. The ambulance rushed him to Mercy General, but—" Paul's voice broke completely. "He was gone before they got there. I saw him, Mom. I identified the body." I remember the mug slipping, the crash of ceramic on tile, the hot coffee splashing across the floor. Caroline arrived within the hour, her law firm giving her immediate leave. My daughter held me while I sobbed, while Paul made phone calls to the funeral home, to Dad's brother in Phoenix, to people I couldn't face talking to. But something felt wrong even through my grief. Paul wouldn't let me see Richard's body. "Trust me, Mom," he kept saying. "You don't want that to be your last memory of him." Paul took control of everything with an efficiency that should have been comforting. Within hours, he'd arranged the cremation, scheduled the memorial service for Thursday, and even written Richard's obituary. He sat at my kitchen table with his laptop, typing furiously, while Caroline and I sat in stunned silence. "Paul, slow down," Caroline said, her lawyer instincts kicking in despite her grief. "Why are we rushing this? Don't we need death certificates for the insurance? For the bank accounts?" "I'm handling it," Paul snapped, then immediately softened. "Sorry, Care. I want to spare Mom as much pain as possible. The funeral director said we can get temporary certificates later today." But when Caroline called Mercy General to get Dad's medical records, the confusion started. "Mrs. Myers never had a patient by that name today," the records clerk insisted. Caroline tried variations: Richard Myers, Dick Myers, even checking under Paul's last name in case of confusion. "They must be swamped," Paul said quickly. "You know how hospitals are. The paperwork's probably not in the system yet. I'll go back tomorrow and sort it out." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept reaching for Richard's side of the bed, expecting to find him there. At 3 a.m., I went to his office, needing to feel close to him. His golf clubs were gone. Of course, they'd be in his car at the hospital. But his Wednesday pills were still in their organizer on his desk. Richard never missed his heart medication. "Paul," I asked the next morning, "where exactly did they find Dad? Which part of the parking lot?" Paul's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. "Why does that matter, Mom?" I was sitting in my bedroom, Paul's obituary draft in my trembling hands, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Wells Fargo. Probably condolences, I thought. Many of the tellers knew us after 30 years of banking there. Mrs. Myers, this is Sandra from Wells Fargo Fraud Prevention. I'm calling about some unusual activity on your joint account. My stomach tightened. Fraud prevention? What kind of activity? Ma'am, there was a substantial withdrawal made approximately 1 hour ago. The full balance of $800,000 was withdrawn in cash from our downtown branch. The room spun. I gripped the phone harder. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. I understand this is concerning, Mrs. Myers. According to our records, Mr. Richard Myers personally appeared at our branch at 11:47 a.m. He presented identification and withdrew the entire balance. Given the amount, we're required to follow up. Listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice shaking. My husband died yesterday morning. He's at the funeral home right now. Someone stole his identity. There was a pause. Mrs. Myers, I'm looking at our security system right now. The person who made this withdrawal is currently on camera. He presented Mr. Myers' driver's license and knew all the security questions. Are you absolutely certain about your husband's situation? My son identified his body yesterday! I was almost screaming now. Caroline and Paul both rushed into the room. Mrs. Myers, given these circumstances, I need you to come to the branch immediately. Bring identification and any documentation you have about your husband's death. We'll need to review the security footage together and file a police report. Paul's face had gone white. What's happening, Mom? I looked at my son, my sweet boy who'd been so strong these past 2 days. Someone emptied our account. Someone pretending to be your father. Paul sank into the chair beside my bed. Oh, God, Mom. Oh, God. The drive to Wells Fargo felt like a nightmare. Carolyn drove while Paul sat in the back, unusually quiet. The branch manager, Mr. Davidson, met us at the door and immediately escorted us to a private office. His face was grim. Mrs. Myers, I've isolated the footage. Before we begin, I need to warn you, this may be distressing. Just show me, I said. The monitor flickered to life. There he was, a man in a surgical mask and baseball cap, standing at the teller window. Dark sunglasses covered most of his face, but something about his posture, the way he shifted his weight. Can you zoom in? Caroline asked, leaning forward. As the image enlarged, I saw it. The slight favor of his left leg, the way he kept his right hand in his pocket while signing with his left. My blood turned to ice. That's not Richard, I whispered. Then louder, my voice breaking. That's not my husband. The man on screen turned slightly, adjusting his mask, and that's when I saw it. The distinctive way he rolled his shoulder, a habit from an old football injury. The same injury that gave him that subtle limp. Mom? Caroline's voice was strange. She was staring at the screen, then at Paul, then back at the screen. That limp. Paul stood up abruptly. I need some air. Sit down, Caroline commanded, her courtroom voice emerging. Paul, sit down right now. Mr. Davidson looked between us, confused. Do you recognize this person? I couldn't speak. My son. My own son. The boy I'd raised, loved, trusted with everything. Caroline answered for me, her voice hard as steel. We need to call the police. That's my brother. Paul's face crumpled. Mom, I can explain. Don't, Caroline cut him off. Don't say another word without a lawyer. Mr. Davidson was already reaching for his phone. I'll need to report this to the FBI as well. This amount makes it a federal crime. I looked at Paul, searching his face for some sign this was all a mistake. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. The son I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd stolen everything while telling me my husband was dead. Caroline wouldn't let Paul leave the bank. You're staying here until the police arrive, she told him coldly. But I couldn't sit in that room another second, watching my son avoid my eyes. I needed air, needed to think, needed to understand how everything had gone so wrong. Back home, I found myself in Richard's office again, searching for something, anything, that made sense. That's when I noticed his desk drawer was slightly open, the one he always kept locked. Inside, beneath tax returns and old warranties, my fingers found a small brass key I'd never seen before. The key had a tag, Unit 47, Pine Lake Storage. Pine Lake was 40 minutes away. Why would Richard have a storage unit there? Caroline found me staring at the key. Mom, what is that? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The storage facility was nearly deserted on a Wednesday afternoon. Unit 47 was in the back corner, a small climate-controlled space. When I opened it, Caroline gasped. It wasn't just storage, it was a secret life. A leather couch, a mini fridge, a flat-screen TV, and on the small table, photographs. Richard with a woman I didn't recognize, both of them smiling at the camera. Recent photos, based on Richard's gray hair. Mom, Carolyn said softly, picking up a manila folder. You need to see this. Inside were bank statements for an account I knew nothing about, deposits and withdrawals going back 2 years, and a business card clipped to the top. Diana Murick, real estate agent. Someone had written on the back, Tuesday, Thursday, 2 p.m. The final document made my knees weak. It was a notebook in Richard's handwriting, dated entries going back 6 months. The last entry was from 5 days ago. Paul knows. He followed me to Pine Lake. He says he needs money, a lot of it. I told him no. He looked at me like he wanted to kill me. Maybe he does. Caroline pulled out her phone. I'm calling the FBI. This changes everything. I sank onto that leather couch in my husband's secret hideaway, surrounded by evidence of betrayals I never saw coming. While Caroline spoke with the FBI, I kept searching through Richard's secret space. Behind the TV, I found a filing box labeled Insurance. My hands shook as I opened it. The policy was from Northwestern Mutual, $2 million in life insurance I knew nothing about. We'd always had a modest policy through Richard's work, maybe $100,000. But this was dated 3 years ago. I flipped to the beneficiary page and froze. The original beneficiary had been me, but clipped to it was a change form dated just 3 months ago. The new beneficiary, Paul Andrew Myers, my son. Caroline, I called, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at the documents and immediately photographed every page with her phone. Mom, look at the signature on the change form. I studied Richard's supposed signature. After 45 years of marriage, I knew his handwriting like my own. The R was wrong, too sharp, too angular. Richard always made his R's with a distinctive loop. It's forged, I said. Caroline was already scrolling through her phone. I'm checking Dad's calendar. 3 months ago. Mom, Dad was in Phoenix that entire week for Uncle Robert's surgery. He couldn't have signed this. In the bottom of the box was a printed email dated 2 weeks ago, from Paul to someone named Victor. Plan B is in motion. Insurance payout will clear within 30 days of death certificate. Full payment guaranteed. My phone rang, startling us both. Unknown international number. Don't answer, Caroline started, but I'd already accepted the call. Tori? The voice was weak, distorted, but unmistakable. The phone slipped from my hand. Caroline caught it, putting it on speaker. Tori, it's me, it's Richard, I'm alive. I collapsed onto the floor of that storage unit, surrounded by evidence of my son's betrayal and my husband's secrets, listening to a ghost speak my name. Richard? My voice cracked. This is cruel, whoever you are. Tori, listen. Tuesday morning, the country club. I never made it there. Paul was waiting in the parking lot. He said he needed to talk about money. When I refused to help him again, God, Tori, our son tried to kill me. Caroline grabbed my hand as Richard continued, his voice stronger now. He had a syringe, injected something into my neck. Insulin, massive dose. I'm diabetic now, Tori. Have been for a year. Didn't tell you because I'm an idiot. Paul knew. He knew exactly what that much insulin would do. You're supposed to be dead, I whispered. Paul identified your body. A bitter laugh came through the phone. Paul identified nobody. He left me convulsing in my car and walked away. But Diana was meeting me. She found me, got me to her friend's clinic across the border in Mexico. She saved my life. Diana Murick, Caroline said loudly. The real estate agent. You found the storage unit. Richard's voice was full of shame. Yes, Diana and I. We've been together for 2 years. I'm sorry, Tori. I'm so sorry. But that's not important now. Paul thinks I'm dead. He needs to keep thinking that, or he'll try again. Why? I asked, though the insurance papers in my lap already told me. Why would Paul? He owes $3 million to the Bratva, the Russian mob. Sports gambling, then trying to win it back. They gave him until Friday, Tori. That's 2 days from now. He came to me desperate, begging. When I refused, when I told him he needed to face the consequences. The look in his eyes changed, like I wasn't his father anymore, just an obstacle. The insurance, Caroline said. $2 million. Plus whatever he could steal from your accounts. Diana's son works at Wells Fargo. Paul didn't know that. Diana had him watching for any suspicious activity. That's the only reason we knew Paul had made his move. My phone beeped with another call. Paul. Don't tell him I'm alive, Richard said urgently. Promise me, Tori, if he knows I survived, you're next. Caroline took control while I sat frozen on the storage unit floor. She called her law firm's investigator, a former FBI agent named Marcus, who specialized in organized crime. Within 2 hours, he'd confirmed our worst fears. The Bratva doesn't play games, Marcus told us, his voice grim over speakerphone. Paul's debt is with the Volkov family. They run sports betting from Boston to Miami. $3 million is serious money, even for them. What happens if he doesn't pay? Caroline asked, though we both knew the answer. They'll kill him. But first, they'll go after everyone he loves to motivate him. That means you, Mrs. Myers, and you, Caroline. Your kids, your husband. My grandchildren. Sweet Emma, only 7. Little James, who'd just started walking. How long do we have? Paul told them he'd have the money by Friday noon. If Richard had actually died, the insurance would have paid out quickly. Suspicious death, but with a death certificate and Paul as beneficiary, maybe a week max. The bank money was supposed to buy him time. Caroline was pacing now, her heels clicking on the concrete. So Paul's plan was fake Dad's death, steal the bank money immediately, collect the insurance within days, pay off the Russians, and what? Pretend to grieve? There's more, Marcus said. I found court documents. Paul filed for power of attorney over you, Mrs. Myers. Claims you're showing signs of dementia. The room spun. What? He's been building a case for months. Documented incidents of confusion, forgetfulness. Even got a Dr. Morrison to write a preliminary assessment. I've never seen any Dr. Morrison. Because he doesn't exist, at least not legitimately. Paul created an entire false medical history. If Richard was dead and you were declared incompetent, he'd control everything, Caroline finished. The house, the remaining assets, everything. My son hadn't just tried to kill his father. He'd planned to destroy me too, to reduce me to nothing while he saved his own skin. Mom, these aren't just loan sharks, these are killers, and Paul brought them into our lives. Paul showed up at my house at 10 p.m., using his key to let himself in. I was ready for him, my phone recording in my pocket, Caroline hidden in the pantry. Mom, we need to talk. His face was haggard, desperate, about Dad's estate. The funeral is tomorrow, Paul. Can't this wait? No, it can't. He pulled out a folder of documents. You need to sign these, power of attorney, some insurance forms. With Dad gone, someone needs to handle things, and Caroline's too emotional. I forced my hands to tremble as I reached for the papers, not hard, given how terrified I was of my own son. I don't understand these. You don't need to understand. He slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. Then softer. Sorry, Mom. I'm just stressed. Look, you've been confused lately. Remember last month when you forgot Emma's birthday? I didn't forget. You did, Mom. And the time you left the stove on? Or when you called me thinking I was Dad? Lies, all lies, but he said them with such conviction. I'm worried about you. Dr. Morrison is worried too. I don't know any Dr. Morrison. Paul's face darkened. See? This is what I mean. You saw him twice last month. He leaned forward, and I smelled whiskey on his breath. Sign the papers, Mom, or things will get complicated for everyone. Caroline doesn't need to know about this. It would just upset her. From the pantry, I heard Caroline's sharp intake of breath. I'll think about it, I said carefully. Paul stood, towering over me. You have until tomorrow night, after the funeral. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. After he left, Caroline emerged, her face pale. We have him on recording. That's coercion, Mom. That's a felony. Diana Merrick arrived at Caroline's house the next morning, just hours before Richard's supposed funeral. She was nothing like I'd imagined. Petite, professional, with kind eyes that held genuine remorse. I know you must hate me, she began. I don't have energy for hate right now, I told her honestly. Just tell me everything. Diana pulled out her phone, showing me text messages from Paul dated 2 weeks back. He found out about Richard and me, threatened to tell you unless Richard helped with his debts. When Richard refused, the threats got worse. She scrolled to a message that made my blood run cold. If you don't help me, you'll be planning a funeral. Mom's too. Tuesday morning, Richard called me, panicked. Said Paul wanted to meet him urgently. I had a bad feeling, so I followed them to the country club. Found Richard in his car, convulsing. I recognized insulin shock. My daughter's diabetic. I carry glucagon everywhere. You saved his life, Caroline said softly. Barely. My son Michael, he manages the Wells Fargo branch. He helped us. Fake death certificate, temporary cover story. We knew Paul would go for the money immediately. Michael was watching for it. She handed me another document. This is the transfer record. Paul didn't just take your $800,000. He'd already moved it to 3 different accounts, then to an offshore account in the Caymans. The FBI traced it. The final recipient was a shell company owned by Viktor Volkov. The Russian mob boss, I whispered. Paul already paid them $800,000, but he still owes $2.2 million. The insurance money would have covered it, with enough left over for him to disappear. Diana's phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Paul just called the insurance company. Claimed Tori is too grief-stricken to handle the claim. He's pushing for expedited payout. Caroline was already dialing. FBI? This is Caroline Myers. We need protection for my mother. Now. Diana reached for my hand. I'm sorry I was part of this deception, but I'll testify to everything. Paul won't get away with this. The FBI moved fast. Agent Sarah Chen arrived within an hour with a forensic accountant and a digital crime specialist. Caroline's living room became a war room, laptops and documents spread across every surface. We've been watching the Volkov organization for 3 years, Agent Chen explained. Your son's debt gives us an in we've been waiting for, but we need concrete evidence of the murder attempt. From Mexico, Richard sent medical records, photos of the injection site, the toxicology report showing massive insulin overdose. Diana provided security footage from the country club she'd convinced them to preserve. Grainy, but clear enough to show Paul approaching Richard's car with something in his hand. It's not enough for attempted murder, the prosecutor admitted over video call. But combined with the fraud, the forged insurance documents, the coercion recording, we can put him away for 20 years minimum. Caroline had been quiet, working on her laptop. Suddenly she gasped, Mom, look at this. She'd hacked into Paul's email, technically illegal, but she was past caring. There were dozens of exchanges with someone named Victor, discussing payment plans, threats, and something else that made my stomach turn. He was going to have you committed, Caroline read. Next week. He'd already booked a memory care facility in Nevada, one of those places that's basically prison for the elderly. The final email was from yesterday. Package will be delivered after funeral, full payment within 48 hours of insurance clearance. Package means you, Mom, Agent Chen said grimly. He was going to sell the house while you were locked away. My phone buzzed. Paul. Mom, where are you? The funeral starts in an hour. Agent Chen nodded. Go to the funeral. Act normal. We'll have agents there watching everything. Tomorrow we spring the trap. Where? I asked. The bank. We'll have him come to sign papers for the insurance claim. Public place, lots of witnesses. He won't run, and he can't hurt you there. The funeral was a mockery. I sat in the front row, accepting condolences for a man who was alive in Mexico, while my son, his would-be killer, delivered a touching eulogy about losing his hero. The FBI agents posed as mourners, their eyes never leaving Paul. That evening, Paul cornered me at the reception. Mom, we need to talk, privately. He led me to the funeral home's office, closing the door behind us. Agent Chen was listening through the wire I wore. "I've scheduled an appointment for you tomorrow," Paul said, pulling out legal documents, "with Dr. Morrison at 9 a.m. Then we'll go to court at noon for an emergency competency hearing." "Court?" My genuine shock helped sell my confusion. "It's for your own good, Mom. You've been getting worse. Yesterday you told Mrs. Patterson that Dad was still alive. She called me, very concerned." I hadn't spoken to Mrs. Patterson in months. "Paul, I don't remember." "Exactly." He seized on my words. "You don't remember. That's why we need to do this now, before you deteriorate further. The judge will appoint me as your guardian. I'll make sure you're taken care of." He pushed the papers toward me. "Sign these. They're consent forms for the evaluation." "I need Caroline to look at them first." Paul's mask slipped. "Caroline doesn't need to know. She's too emotional about Dad. Besides, she's been taking advantage of you. Did you know she's been moving money from your accounts?" Another lie. Caroline had never touched a penny. "If you don't sign voluntarily," Paul continued, his voice harder now, "I'll have to file for emergency intervention. That means the police will take you for evaluation. It'll be traumatic, Mom. Public. All the neighbors will see." Through my earpiece, Agent Chen whispered, "Stall. Don't sign anything." "Can I have tonight to think about it?" I asked. Paul checked his phone, probably calculating how much time he had before the Russians came calling. "Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Be ready, or I'll come with the authorities." He kissed my forehead, and I fought not to recoil from my own son's touch. Back at Caroline's house, Agent Chen laid out the plan. "Paul just made our job easier. Filing a false competency claim while committing fraud? That's federal." The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had traced more of Paul's activities. He'd taken out loans against my house without my knowledge, using forged documents. Another $400,000 he'd already lost to gambling. "We have a judge ready to sign arrest warrants," Agent Chen explained. "But we want to catch him in the act. Tomorrow, when he brings you to this fake doctor, we'll be there." "No," I said firmly. "I won't play the confused old woman anymore. I want him to know I know everything." Caroline supported me. "Mom's right. Do it at the bank. Public controlled, plenty of witnesses. Paul thinks he's coming to expedite the insurance payout." Agent Chen made calls. Within an hour, we had a plan. Michael Merrick, Diana's son at Wells Fargo, would set it up. Paul would be told the insurance company needed additional signatures, witnessed by bank officials. The conference room would be wired, agents positioned as customers and employees. "We'll have the Russians there too," Chen added. "Not the real ones, undercover agents. Paul needs to believe his time's up, that he has no choice but to confess." They fitted me with a new wire, smaller, undetectable. "You'll be completely safe, Mrs. Myers. 15 agents minimum. The moment he incriminates himself, we move." That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, I would face my son as his mother one last time. After that, he would be nothing to me but a criminal who'd tried to destroy his own family. Caroline held my hand. "You're the strongest woman I know, Mom." "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." "Broken things can still be sharp enough to cut," she said. "And tomorrow you're going to cut Paul down." The morning of the confrontation, I played my part perfectly. When Paul called at 7 a.m., I sounded fragile, confused. "Paul, is that you? I can't find Richard anywhere." "Mom, remember? We talked about this. Just get dressed. I'll pick you up in an hour." "Actually," I said, following the script. "The bank called. Something about insurance papers. They said you need to be there too, at 10 a.m. I heard his sharp intake of breath. "The insurance? They're ready to pay out?" "I don't understand it all, dear. But they said both of us need to sign something, in front of witnesses." "I'll meet you there," he said quickly. "Don't go anywhere else, Mom. Straight to the bank." Caroline drove me to Wells Fargo at 9:45. The parking lot looked normal, but I spotted at least 3 FBI vehicles. Inside, Michael Mrick greeted us, his face professionally neutral, despite knowing his mother was with my husband. "Mrs. Myers, we have conference room B prepared. Your son?" He'll be here. The room was perfect. Glass walls for visibility, but soundproof. A long table with documents already laid out. Hidden cameras in every corner. Agent Chen sat in the lobby, dressed as a businesswoman. 2 customers by the window were FBI. The new teller was an undercover cop. At 9:58, Paul walked in. He looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, eyes darting nervously. He kept checking his phone. "Mom," he said, kissing my cheek, "let's make this quick." As we entered the conference room, 2 men in expensive suits walked into the bank. Russians, or at least they looked the part. Paul saw them through the glass and went pale. "It's time," Michael said, closing the door. "Shall we begin?" Paul was trapped, and he knew it. The question was whether he'd confess or try to fight his way out. Either way, this ended today. If you're finding this story as shocking as I did living through it, please consider subscribing to hear more unbelievable but true stories. Your support means everything, and it helps other people who might be facing similar betrayals find strength in knowing they're not alone. Now let me tell you about the moment I finally confronted my son with the truth. Conference room B filled quickly. Besides Paul and me, there was Michael Murick, 2 bank executives who were actually FBI agents, Caroline as my legal representative, and a stenographer who was really a federal prosecutor. Through the glass walls, I could see the 2 Russians sitting in the lobby watching Paul. "Mr. Myers," Michael began formally, "we're here to process the life insurance claim for Richard Myers. However, there are some discrepancies we need to address." Paul shifted in his seat, his leg bouncing nervously. "What kind of discrepancies? This should be straightforward." "Well, for starters," Michael pulled out a folder, "there's the matter of the beneficiary change from 3 months ago." "What about it?" Paul's voice was defensive. "The signature doesn't match our records of Mr. Richard Myers' previous signatures." Michael spread out several documents. "See here and here? The variations are significant." Paul's phone buzzed, a text he couldn't ignore. His face went white as he read it. Through the glass, one of the Russians held up his phone and tapped his watch. "I don't have time for this," Paul snapped. "My father is dead. The insurance needs to pay out, today." "Paul," I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time in days. "Your father isn't dead." The room went silent. Paul's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide. "What did you say?" I pulled out my phone, placed it on the table. "Would you like to talk to him?" Paul stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "This is insane! Mom's having an episode. She's been confused since you told me Richard was dead." I stood too, matching his energy. "Since you stole our life savings? Since you tried to murder your father with an insulin overdose?" "Everybody stay calm," Michael said, though his hand moved to the panic button under the table. Paul's face cycled through emotions: shock, fear, then a cold calculation. "You're sick, Mom. You need help." "No, Paul, you need help." I nodded to Michael, who turned on the large monitor mounted on the wall. The security footage from Tuesday morning filled the screen. There was Paul, in his surgical mask and baseball cap, standing at the teller window. The timestamp showed 11:47 a.m., exactly when the $800,000 was withdrawn. "That could be anyone," Paul said, but his voice cracked. "Watch," Caroline said coldly. On screen, the masked man turned to leave. His distinctive limp was unmistakable. The left leg dragging slightly, the same injury from his college football days that had ended his dreams of going pro. "That's you, Paul," I said. "That's your limp from when you tore your ACL." The teller who'd served him that day, actually an FBI agent, entered the room. "I can confirm, Mrs. Myers, I recognized him despite the mask, the way he held his pen, left-handed but awkward, like someone who'd trained themselves. Plus, he knew details only family would know. Your mother's maiden name, the name of your first dog." Paul's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and his hands started shaking. "Answer it," I said. "Tell Victor you'll have his money." Paul's mask finally cracked completely. "How do you know about Victor?" "I know everything, Paul. The $3 million you owe, the sports gambling that started it all, how you went to your father for help, and when he said no, you decided to kill him for the insurance money. You can't prove." "Actually, We can. The door opened, and Diana Mrick walked in. Behind her, on Michael's laptop screen, Richard's face appeared via video call from Mexico. "Hello, son," Richard said. "Surprised to see me breathing?" Paul stumbled backward, hitting the glass wall. Through it, the two Russians stood up, their eyes locked on him. He was trapped, and everyone in that room knew it. Richard's face on the screen looked haggard, but very much alive. The entire room could see the bandage on his neck where Paul had injected him. "Tell them what you did, Paul," Richard said, his voice carrying across the conference room speakers. "Tell your mother how you waited for me in the country club parking lot, how you said you just wanted to talk." Paul's legs gave out. He sank into a chair, his face in his hands. Richard continued, relentless. "You knew about my diabetes, knew exactly what 300 units of insulin would do. You researched it, didn't you? Diana found your search history. Insulin overdose, how long until death? Can insulin injection be traced? How to fake grief?" "Dad, please. I'm not finished." Richard's voice hardened. "You left me convulsing in my car. If Diana hadn't found me, if she hadn't had glucagon with her, I'd be dead. My own son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, to throw a football. You tried to murder me for money." Diana stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. "These are the medical records from the clinic in Mexico. Insulin shock, nearly fatal. The injection site is documented, photographed. The toxicology report confirms massive insulin overdose, not natural diabetes complications." One of the FBI agents posing as a bank executive spoke up. "Mr. Myers, you're looking at attempted murder, insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. That's 25 to life." Paul's phone rang again. This time one of the Russians was calling. Paul looked at me with desperate eyes. "Mom, please, they'll kill me. They'll kill all of us." "No, they won't," Agent Chen said, entering the room and finally dropping her cover. She showed her FBI badge. "Viktor Volkov was arrested this morning at 6 a.m., along with 12 members of his organization. Your gambling debts are evidence in a federal racketeering case now." Paul looked around the room wildly, realizing how thoroughly he'd been played. "You set me up, all of you." "No, son," Richard said from the screen. "You set yourself up the moment you decided your family was worth less than your debts." Paul tried to run. He made it 2 steps before the undercover agents moved, but I raised my hand, stopping them. "Let him try," I said. "The doors are locked anyway." Paul pulled at the conference room door handle frantically, then spun to face us, cornered. "This is entrapment. I want a lawyer." "You'll get one," Agent Chen said calmly. "But first, would you like to hear what else we know?" She pulled out her tablet, reading from her notes. 6 months ago, you started documenting your mother's supposed confusion. Created false medical records with a Dr. Morrison who doesn't exist. Filed paperwork to have her declared incompetent. You were planning this even before you tried to kill your father. "The house," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You needed the house, too." Caroline pulled up documents on her laptop. "You took out a second mortgage on Mom's house, Paul. Forged her signature. Another $400,000 you lost gambling. If you'd had her committed, you could have sold it. Paid off that debt, too." Michael Merrick added another document to the pile. "We also have records of the bribe you paid me, or tried to. $50,000 to look the other way when you withdrew the money. I reported it immediately, of course." Paul's bravado finally crumbled completely. He fell to his knees, sobbing. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was desperate. They said they'd kill Jennifer, the kids." "Don't you dare," Caroline snarled. "Don't you dare use your family as an excuse. You chose gambling. You chose to keep betting. You chose to try to murder Dad rather than face the consequences." Through the glass, I saw more FBI agents entering the bank, clearing out the real customers. This was it, the moment of complete revelation. "Paul Andrew Myers," Agent Chen said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." As they read him his rights, Paul looked at me one last time. "Mom, please. Tell them I'm not a monster." I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for, and spoke my truth. "You were willing to kill your father and destroy me for money. What else would you call that? The FBI agents moved in sync, professional and swift. One agent pulled Paul's arms behind his back while another secured the handcuffs. The metallic click echoed through the conference room like a judge's gavel. "Mom, please," Paul sobbed as they pulled him to his feet. "I'm your son, your baby boy." I turned away. I couldn't watch, but Caroline held my shoulders steady. "Look," she whispered, "you need to see this through." Agent Chen continued the formal arrest. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As she spoke, Paul's demeanor shifted. The sobbing stopped. His face hardened. "Fine," he spat. "You want the truth? Yes, I did it all. Dad was going to let me die. Mom would have given me the money eventually, but there wasn't time. Victor would have killed Jennifer, killed my kids." "So you chose to kill your father instead," Richard said from the screen, his voice heavy with disgust. "You were already dead to me," Paul shot back. "The moment you said no when I begged for help. And you—" He turned to me, his eyes cold. "You always loved Caroline more anyway." That hurt more than everything else. "I loved you equally, Paul. Always." Bullshit! Caroline the lawyer, Caroline the success. I was just the disappointment who couldn't make it in football, couldn't make it in business, couldn't make it, period. "So you decided to make it as a murderer?" Caroline asked. Paul laughed bitterly. "I decided to survive. That's all any of us are doing." Agent Chen nodded to her team. "Get him out of here." As they led Paul through the bank, past the other agents and the secured Russians, customers from neighboring businesses had gathered outside, drawn by the police cars. Paul kept his head down, but everyone saw him in handcuffs, saw his shame. "Mom, I'm sorry," he called out one last time before they put him in the FBI vehicle. I didn't respond. I was done being sorry. Agent Chen stayed behind after Paul was taken away. The conference room felt eerily quiet without his desperate energy filling it. "Mrs. Myers, I need to update you on the Volkov situation," she said, pulling up files on her tablet. "We arrested Viktor Volkov and 14 members of his organization this morning. Your son's case gave us the probable cause we'd been waiting for." "Are we safe?" Caroline asked. Paul mentioned threats against his family. "That was real," Chen confirmed. "We found communications discussing potential targets if Paul didn't pay. You, your grandchildren, even Richard in Mexico. We've had protective surveillance on all of you for the past 48 hours. I felt sick. My grandchildren were in danger because of Paul's gambling? Not anymore. With Victor in custody and facing RICO charges, the organization is effectively dismantled. More importantly, Paul's debt is now evidence. It can't be collected, legally or otherwise. One of the undercover agents who'd played a Russian entered the room. Up close, I could see he was clearly FBI. Clean-cut, professional, nothing like the dangerous man he'd pretended to be. "Your son genuinely believed we were going to kill him," he said. "That fear made him confess everything. He even offered to testify against Victor in exchange for protection." "Will that reduce his sentence?" I asked, not sure what answer I wanted. "Marginally, perhaps. But attempted patricide, elder abuse, massive fraud, he's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum, even with cooperation." Richard's voice came through the laptop. "Good. Let him rot." But I felt differently. Not forgiveness, not yet. Maybe never. But a mother's heart doesn't simply stop, even when her child becomes a monster. "What happens now?" Caroline asked. "Now," Agent Chen said, "we build an airtight case, and you all try to rebuild your lives." Michael Marick became our unlikely ally in recovering the stolen money. Over the next 3 days, he worked with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit to trace every penny Paul had taken. "The $800,000 from your joint account was recovered from the Cayman Islands account," he explained, showing me the documentation. "It's been frozen pending the criminal case, but the court has already approved its return to you." "All of it?" I could barely believe it. "Every penny. Plus, Wells Fargo's board has approved a settlement. The bank failed to follow proper protocols for such a large withdrawal. Despite Paul having ID and knowing security questions, we should have called you for verbal confirmation." Caroline reviewed the settlement offer. They're offering $200,000 in compensatory damages, Mom. I stared at the number. I don't want money from the bank. You were victims too. Take it, Michael insisted. The bank has insurance for this, and frankly, we need to review our procedures. Your case exposed vulnerabilities we need to address. There was more. Caroline had been investigating Paul's other frauds. The second mortgage on your house. It's been declared null and void. Forged documents mean it never legally existed. The lender will have to absorb the loss. What about the life insurance? I asked. Canceled, Diana said. She'd been quietly helping us navigate the insurance company's bureaucracy. Since the beneficiary change was fraudulent and Richard is alive, the policy is void. You'll get back all the premiums paid, about $30,000. Richard spoke from Mexico via video call. I'm also returning my half of our remaining assets, Tori. It's the least I can do. By the end of the week, my financial position was actually stronger than before Paul's betrayal. But money couldn't buy back my trust, my sense of security, or my relationship with my son. It's blood money, I told Caroline. Every penny reminds me of what Paul was willing to do. Then use it for good, she suggested. Help other victims. Turn Paul's betrayal into someone else's salvation. Caroline moved in with me the day after Paul's arrest. She didn't ask, just showed up with suitcases and her laptop, setting up a makeshift office in Richard's old study. You're not staying alone, she said firmly, not after everything. The house felt different without Richard's presence, without Paul's frequent visits. Quieter, but also somehow lighter. Caroline and I fell into a routine, morning coffee together, her working on cases while I sorted through decades of paperwork, evening walks around the neighborhood. Mom, we need to talk about therapy, Caroline said one evening. For both of us. I'm fine. You're not. Neither am I. Our father had an affair, faked his death, and our brother tried to murder him. That's not something you process alone. She was right. We found Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, who specialized in family trauma and elder abuse. Twice a week, we sat in her office and unpacked the layers of betrayal. I keep wondering if I missed the signs, I admitted during one session. Was Paul always capable of this? People aren't born monsters, Dr. Reeves said gently. But addiction, gambling addiction especially, can fundamentally rewire someone's moral compass. The Paul who tried to hurt your husband wasn't the son you raised. Caroline also insisted on practical changes. We met with her colleague who specialized in elder law, setting up new power of attorney documents, healthcare directives, and ironclad financial protections. No one will ever be able to do this to you again, Caroline promised, holding my hand as I signed the papers. We also changed all the locks, installed security cameras, and Caroline set up monitoring on all my accounts. Not because I don't trust you, she explained, but because I want to catch any suspicious activity immediately. Late at night when the house was quiet, Caroline would sit with me, and we'd look through old photo albums, pictures of Paul as a baby, a toddler, a high school football star, before the gambling, before the desperation, before he became someone we didn't recognize. 2 weeks after Paul's arrest, Richard asked for a video call. Not about Paul or the case. He wanted to talk about us. Caroline sat beside me as I opened the laptop, Richard's face filling the screen. He looked older, diminished somehow. Tori, I need to apologize, not just for Diana, but for everything. 2 years, Richard. You had another life for 2 years while I was planning our retirement. I know. I was a coward. I wanted to leave but didn't know how. Then Diana came along, and I used her as an escape instead of facing our problems. Our problems? I felt anger rising. What problems? I thought we were happy. Richard sighed. You were. I was restless, feeling old, invisible. Classic midlife crisis bullshit, I know. Diana made me feel young again. And now? Caroline asked coldly. Now I'm hiding in Mexico because our son tried to kill me. Diana's here, but it's not what either of us imagined. She saved my life, but she also saw what our affair cost everyone. She can barely look at me. Good, Caroline said. I want to come back, Richard said suddenly, to testify against Paul in person, to face what I've done. No. The word came out stronger than I expected. You stay away. Your testimony can be via video. I don't want you in my house, my life, or my state. Tori, please. 45 years. Ended the day you chose another woman over our marriage. Paul may have tried to kill you physically, but you killed us emotionally long before that. Richard started crying. In all our years together, I'd seen him cry exactly twice, when his mother died and when Caroline was born. Now his tears meant nothing to me. I'm filing for divorce, I continued. Caroline has the papers ready. You'll sign them, give me 60% of our remaining assets. Not out of guilt, but because it's what I'm owed for 45 years of loyalty you couldn't return. I'll sign anything you want, he whispered. I know you will. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. The affair, the secret storage unit, how your lies gave Paul the opportunity to destroy our family. The call ended with Richard nodding silently, defeated. Diana appeared briefly in the background, and our eyes met. Woman to woman, we understood each other. We'd both been fools for the Myers men. This story is almost at its end, but if it's resonating with you, if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, please hit that like button. And if you want to hear how I finally found peace after all this chaos, make sure you're subscribed. The ending might surprise you as much as the beginning shocked you. The sentencing hearing came 6 months later, after Paul had pled guilty to avoid trial. The federal courthouse was packed. Reporters had caught wind of the son who tried to kill his father for gambling debts story. I sat in the front row with Caroline. Richard testified via video link from Mexico, Diana beside him. Paul sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his hair grown long, looking like he'd aged 10 years. The prosecutor laid out the facts methodically. Attempted murder, elder abuse, wire fraud exceeding $1 million, insurance fraud, identity theft, conspiracy with organized crime. Each charge carried years, and they added up fast. Your Honor, Paul's lawyer argued, my client was under extreme duress. The threats from the Volkov organization were real and immediate. Threats he brought upon himself through illegal gambling, the judge responded curtly. Then came Paul's allocution, his chance to address the court. He stood, shackled, and turned to face me. Mom, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve forgiveness. I became someone I don't recognize. The gambling started small, just football games with friends. But it spiraled, and by the time I realized I was drowning, it was too late. He paused, his voice breaking. I told myself I was protecting my family from the Russians, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was a coward who chose the easy evil over the hard right. Dad, I'm sorry I tried to hurt you. Caroline, I'm sorry I betrayed our family. Mom, I'm sorry I became the son you'll wish you'd never had. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood, my prepared notes trembling in my hands. Your Honor, Paul Myers was my firstborn. I loved him from his first breath, but the man who tried to murder his father and destroy his mother isn't my son anymore. He's a stranger who wore my son's face while planning unspeakable cruelty. I ask the court not for vengeance, but for justice, and for enough time that maybe, somehow, Paul can find his way back to being human again. The judge nodded solemnly. Paul Andrew Myers, I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison. Paul collapsed into his chair. 18 years. He'd be 60 when released. His children would be adults who wouldn't know him. I forgive you, Paul, I said quietly as they led him away. But forgiveness doesn't mean escaping consequences. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Thursday in March, exactly 45 years and 3 months after Richard and I had said, I do. Caroline went with me to the courthouse. Richard didn't contest anything. He'd signed everything we'd sent, agreed to every term. It's done, my lawyer said, handing me the sealed decree. You're officially divorced. 45 years, reduced to a stack of papers. I thought I'd feel something more dramatic, relief, sadness, anger. Instead, I just felt empty. He sent a letter, Caroline said, pulling an envelope from her briefcase. Asked me to give it to you after the divorce was final. I took it, but didn't open it. Not yet. That evening, Caroline and I went through the house, packing up the last of Richard's things. His golf trophies, his college yearbooks, the watch I'd given him for our 25th anniversary. Each item a memory of a life I thought we'd shared honestly. "What about the wedding photos?" Caroline asked, holding our album. "Keep them. They're part of your history too, your origin story, even if it ended badly." We found more evidence of Richard's double life, receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, a credit card I didn't know existed. Diana Murick had sent a message through Caroline. She was sorry for her part in everything, and she and Richard were no longer together. "She left him?" I asked. Apparently, seeing him nearly die made her realize she didn't actually love him. She loved the excitement of an affair, not the reality of Richard Myers. That made me laugh, actually laugh, for the first time in months. That night, I finally opened Richard's letter. It was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations. But one line stood out. "I destroyed our marriage because I was afraid of growing old. Now I'm growing old alone, which is what I deserve." I burned the letter in the fireplace, watching 45 years turn to ash. Tomorrow, I'd start over. Tonight, I'd mourn the life I thought I'd had. By September, my life had found a new rhythm. I'd sold the big house, too many memories, too many rooms for one person, and bought a smaller cottage near Caroline. The garden was magnificent, and I spent my mornings among the roses and tomatoes, finding peace in growing things. I'd started a blog called After the Betrayal, A Mother's Journey. Within months, I had thousands of followers, other parents who'd been victimized by their children, spouses betrayed by partners, elderly people who'd been financially abused. We formed a community of survivors. "Your story saved me," one woman wrote. "My daughter was doing the same thing, creating fake medical records, trying to have me declared incompetent. Your blog gave me the courage to fight back." Caroline got married in my backyard on a perfect October day. Her husband, James, was a pediatrician who'd been wonderfully supportive through our family crisis. I walked her down the aisle, both mother and father now. "Any regrets about Dad not being here?" I asked her before the ceremony. "He made his choices," she said simply. "I'm glad the people here are ones who've earned the right to share our joy." Paul had sent a letter from prison asking to be included somehow. Caroline didn't respond. Neither did I. The FBI Victim Services Coordinator called monthly to check on me. The Volkov trial was proceeding, she said. Paul's testimony was crucial. He was cooperating fully, perhaps hoping for a sentence reduction, perhaps just trying to do one right thing. I joined a support group for elder fraud victims. Every Thursday we met at the community center. I was the youngest at 67, but age didn't matter. We all carried the same wounds of betrayal by people we'd trusted. Life wasn't what I'd planned, but it was mine, fully, completely mine. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 1 year after Paul's arrest. I recognized his handwriting immediately. Still neat, still careful, even from federal prison. Caroline was with me when I opened it. "You don't have to read it," she said. But I did. "Dear Mom," it began. "I'm writing this from my cell, where I have nothing but time to think about what I've done. I've been in therapy, real therapy, not the manipulation I tried before. The counselor says I have a gambling addiction and antisocial personality disorder. Fancy words for being a selfish bastard who destroyed his family. I'm clean now. No gambling, obviously, but also no lying, no manipulating. It's harder than you'd think, being honest after years of deception. I wake up every day and have to choose not to be the person who hurt you and Dad. I know you can't forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me. But I wanted you to know that I think about that morning every day when I walked into your kitchen and told you Dad was dead, knowing he was fighting for his life because of me. I see your face when you realized what I'd done. That image is my punishment, worse than any prison. Jennifer divorced me. She's remarried now. The kids don't know me anymore. Emma asked her why she doesn't have a daddy like other kids. Jennifer told her I was sick and had to go away, which I guess is true. I'm not asking for anything, not forgiveness, not contact, not money. I just wanted you to know that somewhere in this monster you had to stop, there's still a piece of the son you raised. He's broken, probably beyond repair, but he remembers being loved by you. That memory is the only clean thing I have left. Paul. Caroline took the letter from my shaking hands. What do you want to do? I walked to my desk, pulled out a pen and paper, and wrote 2 words. No contact. I sealed it, addressed it to the prison, and marked it Return to Sender. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. Richard died on a Wednesday in Mexico, 2 years after Paul's sentencing. Diana Merrick called me herself, her voice soft and respectful. He had a massive heart attack at the beach. It was quick. He didn't suffer. I felt nothing, then everything, then nothing again. Are you still there? Diana asked. Yes. Thank you for telling me. He spoke about you often, she continued, with regret. He knew he'd destroyed something precious. He did. The funeral is Saturday. You're welcome to— No, but thank you. Caroline flew to Mexico to handle the arrangements. Richard had left everything to me in his will, about $200,000 he'd managed to save in Mexico. I didn't want it. Give it to charity, I told Caroline. Something for heart disease research. Make it anonymous. She came back with a box of Richard's belongings that Diana had insisted I have. His wedding ring, which he'd still worn. Photos of us from happier times. A journal where he'd written about his regrets. Page after page of apologies I'd never hear him speak. I read one entry, dated a month before his death. I destroyed my family because I was selfish and weak. Paul inherited those traits from me. Tori deserved better than both of us. The obituary Caroline wrote was simple. Richard Myers, 72, died in Mexico, survived by his ex-wife Tori and daughter Caroline, preceded in death by his integrity. Some people from our old life called with condolences. I accepted them graciously, but felt like a fraud. How do you mourn someone who'd been dead to you for years? I didn't attend any memorial. Instead, I spent that Saturday in my garden, planting new roses where old ones had died. Life ending, life beginning. The cycle continues, with or without us. With the money from the bank settlement and Richard's estate, I did something Paul's betrayal had unexpectedly prepared me for. I started the Myers Foundation for Elder Fraud Prevention. Caroline helped with the legal structure, and within 6 months we were fully operational. Our mission was simple: help elderly victims of family fraud recover financially and emotionally. Our first case was Margaret Chen, an 82-year-old whose grandson had stolen her life savings for cryptocurrency speculation. We helped her recover $50,000 and get her grandson into treatment instead of prison. You saved my family, she told me, crying in my office. Without you, I'd have lost everything, including my grandson. By the end of our first year, we'd helped 53 families. Some cases were simple, confused seniors who needed help understanding their rights. Others were heartbreakingly complex, parents destroyed by addicted children, grandparents raising grandkids while their own children drained them dry. I became a speaker at elder care facilities, banks, and community centers. My presentation was called Trust But Verify: Protecting Yourself from Family Fraud. The person most likely to financially abuse an elderly person isn't a stranger, I'd tell audiences. It's someone they love, someone they trust, someone like my son. The FBI invited me to speak at their annual Elder Fraud Conference. 500 people in the audience, law enforcement, social workers, financial professionals. I told them everything, holding nothing back. Family fraud isn't just about money, I said. It's about the destruction of the most fundamental trust we have. When your child steals from you, they steal more than funds. They steal your faith in love itself. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Agent Chen found me afterward. Paul watches your speeches from prison, she said. The warden says he records them, watches them over and over. Good, I said. Maybe he'll learn something. The foundation grew. We hired staff, opened a hotline, created educational materials. From the ashes of my son's betrayal, something meaningful was growing. Carolyn's daughter arrived on a snowy January morning, 3 years after Paul's arrest. They named her Sarah Tori Morrison. Sarah, after James's mother, Tori after me. She's perfect, I whispered, holding my granddaughter for the first time. Mom, Caroline said from her hospital bed, We want you to be more than a grandmother. We want you to be her example of strength." Little Sarah had Richard's eyes, but Caroline's determined chin. When she wrapped her tiny finger around mine, I felt something heal inside me that I didn't know was still broken. I became the grandmother I'd always imagined being, present for every milestone, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. Sarah's nursery had a rocking chair where I'd sit for hours, singing the same lullabies I'd sung to Paul and Caroline decades ago. "Will Uncle Paul ever meet her?" Caroline asked one day when Sarah was 6 months old. "No," I said simply. "She deserves better than to know that kind of betrayal exists in her bloodline." We created new traditions. Sunday dinners at my cottage, where Sarah would eventually toddle through my garden, picking tomatoes and chasing butterflies. Holiday celebrations filled with chosen family, friends from the support group, colleagues from the foundation, neighbors who'd become dear to us. James proved to be the son-in-law I'd never dared hope for. He called me Mom, helped with the foundation's medical consultations, and never once made us feel like our family's dark history was a burden. When Sarah started talking, her first word wasn't Mama or Dada. It was Nana, reaching for me with chubby arms. "She knows who loves her," Caroline said, smiling. This was what family was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without pain, but built on trust and genuine love. Sarah would grow up knowing that. 5 years after Paul's arrest, I stood before the largest audience of my life, the National Association of Attorneys General Conference. 800 prosecutors, investigators, and victim advocates filled the ballroom. "My name is Tori Myers," I began, my voice steady and strong. 5 years ago, my son tried to murder his father and destroy me financially. Today, I'm here to tell you how we can stop this from happening to others." I'd become an expert I'd never wanted to be. My presentation included warning signs, legal remedies, and most importantly, the psychological profiles of family fraudsters. "They don't start as monsters," I explained, clicking through slides of statistics. "They start as desperate people who convince themselves that family money is somehow already theirs. The gambling addict son who sees his inheritance as a solution. The drug-addicted daughter who believes her parents owe her. The narcissistic spouse who views joint assets as solely theirs." I showed them Paul's forged documents, the fake medical records, the staged photographs he'd used to document my supposed decline. The audience was riveted, horrified, fascinated. The average elder fraud victim loses $120,000. They have a 1 in 3 chance of dying within 3 years of the fraud due to stress and depression. These aren't just financial crimes, they're slow-motion homicides. During the Q&A, a prosecutor from Texas asked, "How do you reconcile loving your son with what he did?" I'd been asked this hundreds of times, but it still made me pause. "I don't," I said honestly. "I love the son I raised. I stopped loving the man who tried to kill his father. They share a face and a name, but they're not the same person. The son I loved died somewhere in a casino, replaced by an addiction that wore his skin." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, dozens of people approached with their own stories, prosecutors who'd seen families destroyed, investigators who'd worked these heartbreaking cases. "You're saving lives," one told me. "Every speech you give prevents another family's destruction." 7 years into his 18-year sentence, Paul was eligible for his first parole hearing. The Victim Services Coordinator called to ask if I wanted to attend or submit a statement. "Neither," I said initially. Then I reconsidered. "Actually, I'll send a written statement." I sat at my desk for hours, crafting my words carefully. "To the parole board, Paul Myers is my son. He tried to murder his father and destroy me to pay gambling debts. These are facts that no amount of time can change. I neither support nor oppose his release. That decision belongs to you, the professionals who can assess whether he's still a danger to society. I can only tell you that he remains a danger to my peace of mind. If released, I ask that his parole conditions include no contact with me, my daughter, or my granddaughter. We've built new lives from the wreckage he created. We deserve to live them without fear. I'm told Paul has been a model prisoner. I'm glad. Perhaps he's finding the humanity he lost. But his redemption, if it comes, cannot include reconciliation with those he tried to destroy. Respectfully, Tori Myers. Caroline chose to attend the hearing. She came back shaken. He looks old, Mom. Gray, thin. He cried when they asked about his crimes, said he thinks about what he did every day. And? Denied. The board said the severity of his crimes against vulnerable family members requires more time. He can try again in 5 years. That night, I found myself looking at old photos of Paul as a child. His first day of school, his high school graduation, his wedding. When had that bright-eyed boy become someone capable of attempted murder? I put the photos away. Some questions don't have answers worth finding. 10 years after that horrible October morning, I stood in my garden with Sarah, now 7 years old, teaching her to plant tulip bulbs for spring. "Nana, why do we plant them when it's cold?" she asked, her small hands dirty from digging. "Because beautiful things sometimes need to rest in the darkness before they can bloom," I told her, thinking of my own journey through darkness. The garden had become my sanctuary. Every plant represented recovery, roses for resilience, tomatoes for nourishment, lavender for peace. Sarah loved helping, her childhood untainted by the knowledge of what her family had endured. "Tell me about when Mommy was little," Sarah said, as she often did. I told her about Caroline's first garden, how she'd insisted on planting jelly beans, convinced they'd grow into jelly bean trees. Sarah giggled, the sound healing something in me every time. A letter had arrived that morning, another one from Paul, forwarded from the foundation despite my no-contact request. I'd burned it unopened in the same fireplace where I'd burned Richard's last letter years ago. "Nana, who sends you letters that make you sad?" Sarah asked, too perceptive for her age. "Someone from long ago, sweetheart. Someone who made bad choices." "Why don't you tell them to stop?" "I have. Sometimes people don't listen, even when we set boundaries." "Then we just keep our own boundaries stronger, right? Like the fence around our garden?" From the mouths of babes. "Exactly right, my love." That evening, as Sarah played in the yard while Caroline and James prepared dinner, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over my small but perfect world. The garden was thriving. My family, my real family, was happy. The foundation had helped hundreds of victims. I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Today marks exactly 10 years since Paul walked into my kitchen with false tears and a lying heart. I'm 77 now. Sarah is 7, and Caroline is expecting her second child, a boy they'll name James Jr. The foundation has helped over 1,000 families recover from elder fraud. My story, once my greatest shame, has become a beacon for others lost in the darkness of family betrayal. Paul has 6 years left on his sentence. He still writes monthly letters I don't read. The prison forwards them to the foundation, where they're filed unopened in a box marked "Boundaries Maintained." That box is my testimony that love doesn't require self-destruction, that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Richard has been gone 8 years. I rarely think of him now, except when Sarah makes a face that reminds me of happier times. Diana Murick sends a Christmas card each year. She remarried, seems happy. I'm glad someone found joy from that mess. My cottage garden is magnificent this spring. Sarah and I planted those tulip bulbs deep, and they've emerged stronger for their time in the darkness. Like me. Like all of us who've survived betrayal by those we trusted most. I've learned that blood may be thicker than water, but it's not thicker than respect, than trust, than the boundaries we need to protect ourselves. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. My name is Tori Myers. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a survivor. And I'm finally completely free. If my story helped you recognize red flags in your own life, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of survival and justice. And remember, setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. Your peace of mind is worth more than anyone's approval, even family. Thank you for listening to my truth.